discussion on life and gatherings of worship. Two typical areas of worship we think about. It will be a little bit more clear as we go forward. The material, this material is based on, there are two here, one from Daniel Block and the other one from David Peterson, two of my favorite authors, biblical scholars on worship and Old Testament, excellent. So almost 100% of content they are coming from those two books. So this is a sort of an intro section before we go over sessions 1 and 2. So welcome once again. So in this presentation today, we want to think about holistic definition of worship and also biblical definition of worship. Worship can be pretty narrow in our understanding sometimes and practice. So I think it's important to really go back to the Bible, broaden our worship understanding in two major areas. One is life, and the other one is, as Pastor mentioned, the corporate gathering, communal service. So those are sections 1 and 2. In this opening, though, before going into sessions, we would like to go over the word worship itself before discussing areas of worship. I think it's important to clarify the word worship itself based on Hebrews and Greek original words, so that we can have a good foundation and framework before we head into sessions. So if you open like your Google and just search worship, you might see some of these pictures. Even today, this is kind of a 3 years old pictures, but I was expect to see the same thing. A lot of them are about worship concert, gatherings, and music, right? So when you think about that, actually, at least from my perspective, it's pretty narrow definition or view of worship. So this is not close to comprehensive worship definition. So typical symptoms we experience last 20, 30 years is really music. Worship is all about music style. People fight about this issue. People even named it worship war. They call it worship war, traditional modern worship style. This worship war, is nowadays almost gone. People don't talk about this, I think, from 10 years ago. But it left a lot of scars and unnecessary conflicts. So it's really narrow view of worship creates a lot of problems in our lives and ministry. This is just an illustration. So then how can we really understand worship? Obviously, we want to go back to the Bible, right? UBF motto, go back to the Bible, right? In terms of worship, we want to do the same thing. But here I want to emphasize we need to go back to the original words, Hebrew and Greek words behind the worship, English word worship, because English word worship, which is worth plus ship, originally speaking, they are really based on original Greek and Hebrew words. This actually English word doesn't actually explain the full scope of worship in the Bible. So oftentimes it hinders our understanding. So unless we unlock the original words, it's a little bit difficult to actually have a full scope understanding. So we want to actually today go into Hebrews and Greek a little bit. And as we do so, in the Old Testament and New Testament words, we will discover in this intro section 3 dimensions of worship as a preparation for sessions. One is heart and physical gesture and ritual. 3 dimensions or layers of worship we're going to discover in the Bible. So let's jump into that. So first, heart's attitude as worship. So before discussing anything about 3 dimensions, I would like to kind of throw this nice concentric picture or 3-layer picture right here at the bottom. This is straight from Shema, right? Deuteronomy 6:5. Hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God with your all your heart, with your all your strength. So Moses really, urged them to love God. In some sense, we're going to, talk about that as a worship part of worship soon. But Moses' understanding of a worshiper or life as a worshiper is, if you really read carefully, original words here, is three layers. At the core, heart and mind, in us, and the second, person himself or gesture, like a bodily, more like a bodily, and then whole life, including resources. So if I ask a question to, let's say, Pastor Kevin, do you have your heart? He will say yes, right? Do you have your body? Yes. Do you have your house and cars and doggy and family members, right? Yes. So understanding of Moses regarding worshippers' life is comprehensive. It's got three layers. So therefore, when we think about worship, all three layers of life should be involved in worship. So the first core layer is really heart's attitude. Hebrew and Greek words are here. Deuteronomy chapter 10 uses fear. This word here basically indicating reverence, fear, heart's attitude toward God, orientation of your heart. So before any actions of worship, our hearts and mind should be aligned with God. We should express reverence and fear or orientation toward God first, right? So without this, worship actions are not acceptable before God. So God has a spiritual X-ray. He can see what's in our heart, right? Even though I cannot see what's in your heart. So everything is fully disclosed before God, so God can reject and accept looking at our hearts, which is intuitive. So as you know, the famous musician Matt Redman's, Heart of Worship, is about this part, right? When the music fades, all is stripped away, and when everything is stripped away, person, action, offering, everything is stripped away. Really, I'm coming back to the heart of worship. Yeah. So that's really the starting point, the core. So we'll come back to this circle again and again. Next one level is physical gesture, more like a bodily action, response to God's grace. So second layer. So Hebrew and Greek words are here. Proskuneo, this is a quite famous word. So oftentimes in the Bible, the passage is described like Genesis 22, Abraham's worship. He bowed down, he fell down, prostrate before higher authority, right? It really expresses bodily submissions and homage toward the higher authority. In Matthew 2, Magi came and bowed down. He really paid homage to baby Jesus. That's the word here. This is something we saw often. And the last part is the outer layer, which is, also these are the words, service and ritualistic service. Those are the meanings. So for example, Matthew chapter 6, no one can serve two masters, as a servant to the master, right? And the famous Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifices. This is a proper worship, right? So these are kind of typical usages in the Bible. It oftentimes involves ritualistic service, temple worship, and corporate worship, and also one's dedication as a servant to the person. And the motivation to serve God is obviously his redemption, his salvation, so which causes us to respond to him. So before jumping into, that was basically all three layers of worship as a worshiper's life. Before going into session one, I would like to launch our session based on this sort of big picture here. I call it worship dichotomy. Oftentimes, as a Christian, a lot of people might have this kind of view on worship, quite split. Worship is a very, in some sense, a split concept in our minds oftentimes. So right side of the brain says worship is service. I go to Sunday service. I go to Saturday service and praise and worship night. So worship is we gather people and have a service worship, or even Old Testament temple service and temple worship. This often is related to ritualistic or gatherings. On the flip side, a lot of also authors wrote a book about worship as a lifestyle. Serving my family members and daily devotion. You really work hard at the company as a representative of Christ to reflect Him, and 10 Commandments in the Old Testament examples. So a lot of times, this concept of worship in our mind is kind of split left and right. Sometimes the trouble comes when a person highly emphasizes or understands only one side. For example, I went to the Sunday service. From Monday through Friday, I'm free. It's my life. I control. And then I go and pay homage to God Sunday, a couple hours, and give $100 offering, and come back. I'm done. I served Him. I worshiped Him, and I don't care about left side of the life. Family might be suffering, or father might be neglecting children or wife, right? Then, can God accept the person's worship, right? Weekly. So we shouldn't compartmentalize these two areas. Rather, we should try to unite them and then see holistic picture, combined picture of worship. That is important, I think. If you think about riding a bike, left side of pedal, right side of pedal, if you want to, use your only right leg and just try to go forward, it doesn't work, right? It has to be both sides, and at the same time, it has to be, they have to be in sync with each other, influencing each other. So our sessions are basically based on these two concepts. First session right now, I'm going to be talking about life itself, holistic life itself as an act of worship. So session one, let's explore something here. Life as a worship, it can be a little bit broader concept. So a lot of times, as I mentioned, people might have a very narrow concept of worship, but worship can be way broader than the concept we are experiencing or thinking weekly. So here in this session, this is the flow of the presentation. We'll really go back to the Old Testament, specifically Torah, Moses' 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, and Deuteronomy. 3 books are really the focus in this presentation. And then starting from the creation, we're gonna jump point A to B to C to highlight the most crucial moments in the concept of worship. Creation, fall, and redemption, and covenant of Israel, and redemption, and way of life in the covenant, and also whole life as a covenant commitment. So if you think about the famous verse in Romans 12:1, this is sort of a pivotal verse, right? Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. That's proper worship in view of God's worship, mercy, right? Where is that coming from? Did St. Paul invent that verse, or New Testament era changed the concept of worship? I don't think so. St. Paul, Apostle Paul, was going straight back to Torah, and then he grabbed Exodus, Deuteronomy, and then rewrote it in Greek, and then that became Romans chapter 12, verse 1. So nothing new, actually. So where is that coming from? Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy. So we'll explore that right now. And as I mentioned, Romans fulfilled in Christ, the worship concept is in the New Testament. rewritten Romans chapter 12:1. So before going, I would like to throw some questions, thought-provoking questions, hopefully. Have you felt that you were not in the place of worship, but in the world as you started Monday? Yeah, you got a cup of coffee in the morning Monday, and then you're going to work. And then you feel like, it was a glorious worship on Sunday, and then I'm like tired. I want to go back to Sunday worship service. This is not good. Have you felt that? I've felt that feeling so many times. I want to, rewind my time and I go back to Sunday worship service. This is not worshiping life. Second, how can we understand sin in worship's perspective? So sin plays a role in worship, obviously. It's very important. And what is more important, offering versus heart? We mentioned the heart issue briefly, but offering versus heart. Heart should be the foundation of worship before. What does daily worshiping life look like? And how does Christ work on the cross make us worship? So hopefully we would like to answer these questions. So we're going to start from creation, Genesis chapter 1 and 2, right? So creation is really the, one out of two major reasons for worship. If you read Revelation chapter 4, it's all about creation. And creation is the broad backdrop of worship. We need to understand the creation and what God intended in that creation order. It's so important. So in this picture, as you can see, God is, top of the hierarchy. Adam is standing here. This is the creation, right? So Adam was created in the image of God, we know. And importantly, Adam was supposed to rule over his creation as God's representative or ambassador or king. So the Old Testament verses really emphasizes the glory and honor given to mankind over this creation, and we are supposed to really rule over all creation as God's representative. And interestingly, another layer or color added in this context is really serve. The word abed we looked at in the previous slides. It shows up here actually. Serve and take care of his creation. So as a God's servant or representative, we are supposed to take care of his creation and serve. So as a kind of a little bit of digression and salt and pepper here, Christ, Mark chapter 10, verse 45, came to serve, right? That word might be coming from here. So if the humanity lost this aspect of service because of fallen nature, then Christ came to serve and give his life to restore us. So he is actually indeed restoring original calling of a mankind. So interestingly though, right away after this creation, in Genesis 3, something gross happened, something traumatic happened. It's a total perversion of God's creation order. We call it fall. Adam sinned, unfortunately, sadly. So this was really the perverse worship, beginning of the perverse worship or idol worship or false worship. Let's take a look at this context very carefully. Interesting. If you look at Genesis chapter 3, Satan came through a serpent, and then he began to roll out these lies. And what happened? Basically, Adam through Eve, they really listened to Satan and submitted to the voice of serpent, right? And then received it. So are they supposed to submit themselves to the creatures? No, they are supposed to submit themselves to Creator, right? Do you see the reverse order here? Very interesting. Adam was bowing down, not this way, right? And there was a clearly lie going on. And then eventually the outcome was he replaced service to God and the world with his own self-interest. So self, me, my, mine, they became this focal point of his life. Not outgoing to the world, rather incoming interest, focusing on himself. So this whole flow in Genesis chapter 3 was interpreted by Apostle Paul in chapter 1 of Romans. Although Adam knew God, Adam is the representative of humanity, right? Adam didn't glorify him as God nor gave thanks to him. Rather, he pursued the glory of, where is that? Truth was distorted with lies, and then Adam and Eve bowed down and served the creatures rather than the Creator. So this is New Testament interpretation of sort of a Genesis chapter 3 and following humanity after this distorted worship or reversal of creation order in the fall. Sort of our spiritual DNA is totally damaged, and our hearts were crooked and distorted from Genesis chapter 3, together with all the humanity following after Adam. So interesting passage. So what happened after that is this. So this problem of distorted heart or fallen nature, reversed or worship, is manifested right away in Genesis chapter 4 through Abel's and Cain's story. As you know, it can be called a post-fall problem. Very interesting story here. This is exactly heart versus offering issue. So, so effect of fall is really orientation of heart does not match up with the act of worship. So even though somebody might be acting like a worshiper, offering something, but in reality, the heart's condition orientation does not align with action often, especially in Cain's case in chapter 4. So if you carefully look at the context here, the reason why God didn't accept Cain's offering is not that because he was kind of offering grain, not animal fat, not the material itself. It was really his orientation of his heart. He was very crooked inside against Abel, and he was very angry at God. So it is his inner being, as we talked about heart at the core of the circle, that was wrong, not his offering. So eventually that was expressed in his own murdering action against his brother. So really what we have to take out of this context is God looks at the offerer's heart first before looking at the offering itself. So as you can see in this diagram, oftentimes some people might have Cain-like understanding of offering or worship. We offer something, God is going to look at me through the offering. God is going to look at me through the coins I dropped. No, the other way. God is going to look at the offering through my heart. God is going to look at the action of my worship through my inner being. So it's the other way. So God, the lens God uses is our hearts, our inner being first. So this is kind of a very pivotal point in this context. So we are about midpoint of the presentation here. So then, we have a problem here. Problem presented, God brings the solution always, right? How does God save us? We call it redemption, right? I mean, God brought salvation through Abraham and multiple people, but really at the society's level or global level, this Exodus chapter 19 is really the climax or the foundational point, right? We call it um, covenant. So God established old covenant through Moses with Israelite people to bring this redemption and establish this salvation and also worship through covenant relationship. So um, as you know, Moses, through God's work, brought them out of Egypt, out of slavery. And purpose is really building worshiping nation, worshiping community. The same word showed up here under the covenant relationship with God. So the original calling from Moses is Exodus 3:12. You bring them out, you will worship God on this mountain, Mount Sinai, which happened in Exodus 19 through 21 or so. So this is really not a single person now, a couple million, national level, right? So in this covenant relationship, God gave them identity, kingdom of priests and holy nation. We like this a lot as a UBFer. So that's really the nation that serves Cohen as a priest before God and representing God's kingdom before other kingdoms out there and holy nation. And one stipulation is here, God, they have to obey God fully. So it is a conditional covenant. So therefore there's a law of God, command of God, stipulation. So they have to follow those things. So let's think about that part here. In that covenant worshiping kingdom, what is really the central basis or rule is really 10 commandments, as you know, Exodus chapter 20. So what Exodus is saying here is, okay, redeem the covenant relationship with God and covenant society of worshiping people. Here is the 10 most important things you have to follow in that society, in that worshiping kingdom. That's 10 commandments, right? They have to obey. Interesting thing is the 10 commandments, they don't talk about ritualistic process. You wash this thing this way and then put the candle here and temple has to be built this way. They don't talk about it. If you read 10 commandments, all of them are really lifestyle, how we conduct our life. So that's an interesting part. So worshiping community, it's easy to think that temple is here, priest shows up there and worshiping God, and this is how you conduct worship. But if you really go to the center of the principles of worshiping covenant community, God is talking about here life, how you conduct your life. So that's really kind of a different things for some people. So principles of life is really laid out here. How we respond to God, the Redeemer, and how we should maintain our commitment in this covenant relationship. The first three is really about vertical relationship with God. The others are horizontal relationship, as you know. So Jesus summed up the Bible, love the Lord and love your neighbor as yourselves, right? So it's more like an ethical and way of life, not ritualistic process. So that's why, once again, in the worshiping community, life itself, how you conduct your life, is emphasized. And that's really the beginning point and foundation. So if you go a little bit further to Deuteronomy, Moses really expounded this aspect through Shema here. Oh, hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God. Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, right? So Moses here is saying the totality of life, the entire life, totality of life in the covenant community. That's how you live out a worshiping relationship, covenant relationship with God. So Lord is one. God is only one true God who redeemed. How do we respond to Him? Is love. This is the Hebrew word. So it's not just emotional kind of status. It's really action that is demonstrating your commitment to Him. So that's love here. And once again, coming back to this circle again, response happens in three dimensions: inner being, all person, all the person owns. So this symbolic expression or circular expression is really Moses' own understanding of worshippers' life before God. So we have to really look at all three areas or dimensions of life as we worship. Yeah, as I mentioned before. So Deuteronomy chapter 10 also kind of comprehensively describes how we worship: fear, walk, love, serve, keeping commands. All these aspects of life, they are all involved in the process. So we are kind of closing out this first presentation. So that's the Old Testament. But New Testament wise, what does it mean? So now we're jumping toward the New Testament and really shifting gear to New Testament passages rather briefly. So everything is fulfilled in Christ, we know in the New Testament. So as you know, Israelites were not faithful to the covenant. Book of Hebrews explains that. So Old Testament stories are a lot, basically shadow of Christ's redemption story fulfilled by Christ. A new covenant is also established. And so as Israelites responded to God's redemption, New Testament or New Covenant, Christians are supposed to respond to Christ's redemption the same way. Again, whole life is required. And also God's word and faith, our lifestyle according to God's word and obedience. All those things are involved in the process. So let me finish by conclusion or summary. Worship. So let's zoom out and kind of go through what we had gone through right now. Looking back, we can summarize that worship is our response to God. Yeah, response to God. It is ultimately our reaction to God for what He has done. Two pillars of motivations are creation and redemption. And God's main concern is, in this response, is how His covenant people should live. Yeah, especially in the Old Testament, it was super clear that a lot of things God said, Moses said, they are about how we conduct our life, starting from our core, heart, inner being, and our outer layers. So as St. Paul said, offer your bodies, meaning totality of your whole life, heart, mind, body, all the resources we have. This is how we respond. All the layers should be involved in that reaction to God. Important part here, once again, is our inner life and outer life should be consistent. If our heart is not right with God, let's say I was fighting let's say hypothetically, I was fighting with my wife the whole Monday through Friday, and this Sunday I show up and present myself and praising God and thanking God, and probably God is going to laugh at me. So there's no two dimensions that can be inconsistent against each other in this picture of worship. It is comprehensive. It should be consistent. Everything should be involved. So the undevoted heart, offering not acceptable, no visible service means, on the flip side, eventually heart has not changed.